Peace and light, that old guy Australia, coming to you from the far south coast, New South Wales, on a beautiful Saturday. Doing a house down here, and Gary thinks I've buggered off for a bit of lunch, but instead I've been to the dog show at Bermagui down here. If you're ever down here on the roundabout this weekend, February 11th, they have the biggest dog show I've ever seen on the south coast down here. It is heavily patronised, and I'm a dog lover. I'm a very big dog lover, and so despite the fact that a lot of the people are a little sensitive about going anywhere near their animals, and I understand that because they're highly trained for show purposes, etc., etc. There's some beautiful dogs down there. Oh my God. Sensational. Now, the good part about it is it's a stinking hot day, beautiful day. We've had rain during the week, and this poor people who do this dog show, true story, right? I reckon it's a 50-50 split between rained out and we held the show. Every year they get hammered. In fact, when that last lot of rain came, people were going, oh, it must be the dog show weekend. So, But anyway, it's well worth it. If you're ever down this way, around about that time of year, around the February 11th, they have this dog show at Bermagui. It's brilliant. I'd urge you all to come down to it. Now, that be as it may. I'm doing a video in response to one that I was sent, which was a video of a live studio recording of Ben Fordham doing an interview, I think on Thursday, about the Canberra Rally, which is taking place this weekend in Canberra, which is an anniversary, I guess, of the Fordham Rally that we held last year that Joe and I attended. Now, there's a few things I want to say about this. The first one is that you need to understand that 2GB was given enormous tax breaks and was paid a tremendous amount of money, well above your standard advertising rates, by the Australian government, that is a taxpayer, you, to push the COVID narrative and the injection narrative. So they're beholden to the government. And Ben Fordham, the little baby-faced shock jock, is a shill of 2GB, and that's really all he is. There's nothing more to it. And so in this particular video, he's interviewing a lady from Victoria. She remains anonymous because she's a coward. We don't know who she is, but some people will know. She's got a Twitter account where she's hell-bent on exposing truthers. So that's her thing, apparently. And so this has all been set up. She doesn't ring in. This is pre-planned. He starts his show and he goes, we've got on the line so-and-so, and they have this huge love fest, a big hit giggle thing, and it's just horrendous. It really is ugly. But there's a number of issues that this woman who supposedly is exposing the truther community brings up that I wanted to address personally. So I'll try to do them as quickly as I can. Now, the first thing you need to know is that Joe and I went to that Canberra Rally last year with some good friends of ours, and we were with a group from the Navy, and it was fantastic. I had a great time, really enjoyed it immensely, and in fact, it's the biggest crowd I think I've ever been, well, not the biggest crowd I think I've ever been in. It was the biggest crowd I have ever been in. And I went to 92,000 at the MCG to watch my beloved Richmond play. We went to Akadaka with 65,000 at ANZ Stadium, and many, many more concerts Joe and I have been to. So I've got a good idea of numbers, or a good basic idea of numbers. There's a reason I want to touch on that, but I won't do it right now. I'll get to that in a second. But the first thing I want to address are the things that this lady spoke about, and she supposedly is the benchmark that Ben Fordham uses to mock the truther movement. The first one is Ben Fordham's use of the phrase cooker. Now, there was a post going around you may have seen with Kelly Slater being interviewed by Graham Hood, and Pat Cash is on there. And there's a lady, I think her name's Alex Casey. She's a journalist, did a time at Griffith University, then she went to work for News Corp, etc., etc. She's got a degree in media and arts and media. And so she's a respected journalist. But the point is, when you read her take on that interview that she watched with Hoodie and Graham and Kelly Slater and Pat Cash and a couple of others, the wording verges on slanderous. It really, really does. But they can get away with it because the media supports that stance. So if it was the other way around, you and I would be prosecuted, but she wouldn't be, because that's the stance that they support, the narrative they support. It's really ugly, ugly, ugly words. Now, the words that she uses, the term cooker, as I said, Ben Fordham trots it out. This phrase, which the journalist says, is an Australian slang term for conspiracy theorists. Not true. This only came about with a train brother shooting up in Queensland, was when it first appeared on the scene, and it was picked up by the media. It may have been propagated by the media, I don't really know, but it's a really ugly derogatory term, and I despise the usage, because as Ben Fordham starts that interview out with this woman from Melbourne by saying a cooker is someone whose brains are frazzled and fried from listening to conspiracy theories. And I'm like, oh, okay, really, Ben, good on you. That's a terrific way to wipe everybody off the map. Now, we were in that sea of humanity in Canberra last year up at Camp Epic, and I can tell you now, I spoke to doctors, lawyers, I spoke to carpenters and plumbers, I spoke to the fire brigade guys. You'd like them girls, they're all young, pretty fit and in their uniforms. Great. Ambulance drivers, caterers, hospitality, aged care workers, nurses. I spoke to so many people. And the wondrous part about that camp was, as I walked around that night, when I wasn't filming, you could just walk straight into anybody's campsite and you could just start talking to them. And there was so much love in the air, so much acceptance, so much respect. There was no drunkenness. You would think that amongst that amount of people, there'd be, particularly if it was at any other kind of concert, there'd be a bit of drunkenness and fighting or whatever might be the case. None of that was the case whatsoever. None. It was very, very peaceful. And it was just a beautiful, 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 beautiful time. I made a lot of good friends out of it, and I got to talk to a lot of different people. And so we began to understand that we were not alone in this movement, in the narrative that we're following. We're not alone. There's a tremendous billions of people worldwide who are involved in this, and particularly in Australia. It showed the lies of these statistics that government have trotted out, which I'll get to again in a moment. That was one of the things I just wanted to, make a point about. You could not possibly say that every person who believes this is brain-addled, because when you look at the diverse range and age of the people who were there, you couldn't just wipe off that many people and go, oh, they're all brain-addled. It's just ridiculous. It is so stupid, it barely needs to be mentioned. The second thing I wanted to bring up was the points this lady made in her commentary to Ben Fordham. The first one being that there were 10 to 15,000 people there, or 20,000 people, or whatever she said, at the event. Now, I can tell you now, that is the biggest crock of shit I've ever heard. We know this. The media tried to, paint it down, but it was not the case. Now, I want to just give you an idea, because Joe and I were there. We were with our friends. We were in a group. We were probably 60 wide across these stretches of highway, and we were about 1 kilometre from Parliament House, the new Parliament House, the unconstitutional one. We were about 1 kilometre away, and you could see, if you know the road, it goes up and up over the hill to a bridge up or an overpass up near the near Parliament House. And we were stopped. There was nowhere to go. The crowd was that thick all the way up for that kilometre. There was nowhere to go. Now, we were not at the end of that rally. In fact, way behind us, as far back as we could see. And all I did was hold my phone up and over my head and film behind me. It was a sea of humanity. Now, we couldn't go anywhere, so the group of us that we were with, we edged our way, excuse me, went out of the left side of the rally, and we walked across to the old Parliament House, the constitutional Parliament House. We walked over there. Now, in that grounds alone, because they had 2 stages set up, one at the top, one at the bottom, there were over 25,000 people just there alone. Just there alone. I'm telling you now, I was in a crowd of 90,000 at the MCG, 60-odd thousand at ANZ. I'm telling you, there was at least 25,000 at Old Parliament House. So that in itself shows you the kind of bullshit. Surely you can see that. I don't care whether you believe it or not. I'm telling you now, that's an absolute factual truth of what I can tell you happened. The second part of that was, during that night, I walked around to the other side, all the way around, quite quickly, to where the campground started. If you know Canberra Showgrounds, Camp Epic at the campgrounds. Then I slowly began to work my way back all around the grounds. I was going into campsite, introducing myself, asking people where they were from, talking to them, did a little filming. It was fantastic. And after about 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours, I'd made my way round to whereabouts near where our camp was, and I'd pretty much had enough. But the campsite continued up way around the corner, up over the hill, and way up on top of the hill, the farmer had opened the gates to his property, and people had just flooded through the gates onto his farm. They were camped right over his property. So that's a lot of people, honestly. It was a lot of people. So I had to make an estimate, a guesstimate, as to how many people I thought were at that rally, and I came up with what I considered was a conservative estimate. You go watch the video, 400,000 plus, conservatively. Now, a guy had full drone footage of the march, full drone footage, and he used a program which does a head count, and he got over 1 million people. Now, if you think that's ridiculous, please understand that the Traffic Authority in Canberra reported an influx of over 1 million vehicles into Canberra on that weekend. Now, a lot of people have been there for a couple of weeks prior. Then I had friends come down from Brisbane. We had friends down from Cairns. We had people up from Victoria. There were people there from Victoria and Western Australia and South Australia and Northern Territory. People from everywhere had made their way to Canberra for that rally. It was astonishing. I was absolutely gobsmacked by the places people say they came from. So you can see there was a massive influx of people prior to the rally starting. Then we had the people arrive. Then all of the accommodation in Canberra was booked solid. That was all the Airbnbs, motels, private residences, whatever might have been the case, pubs, clubs, whatever. Everything was booked solid. Then you had the locals, which were Canberra, Fyshwick region, of which there was massive amount of support from them. No matter what the media may tell you, we had a lot of those people come in as well. So you think about the amount of people and where they came from and how many had converged on that area. The media's, you can see the media's lies. You can. It doesn't make any sense. The next thing I want to address is the woman said that it was a very hot day in Canberra and the UV was very, very high and people got sunburnt, and then they blamed the AFP for utilising weaponry on the crowds. And of course, Ben Fordham chortled his head off. Oh my God, sunburnt and the AFP's to blame. Very, very funny. So now I just want to address that little issue personally myself. Now, we're with some Navy friends. One of mine is a 20-year veteran of the Navy, quite a high-ranking guy, very intelligent man, and he's bloody tall. And he was one of the first ones in our group to notice these machines, or certainly one of them. He knew what they were. I can't remember at this stage, but over a year ago and I'm old. But he was questioning Australia. He goes, what the hell have they got those things for? And so I asked him what they were, and he said, well, we use them when we've got a boarding party. We fire them at the ship that the guys are about to board. When they come on board the ship, there's no violence. There's no... the people with brains are scrambled. They don't know what's going on. They're absolutely... These particular machines affect the brain, and the people themselves are very confused individuals, and then the boarding party comes on board and they meet very little resistance. And I was shocked at that machine, just that machine. But then we had Aussie Cossack, who went and approached the AFP officers, who had very little skin showing. They had hats on, sunglasses, earplugs, masks, gloves and full suits. And they were just standing there. They were protected in every area. And they had these damn machines there. Some of them were mounted on tripods on top of Land Cruisers. There were heaps of them. Wow. And they were all over the place. They were there for a reason, you know. They weren't there for show. They were there for a bloody reason. Believe me. Aussie Cossack went up to them and asked them about these machines, and they wouldn't respond. Then we had another guy who snuck over to one of these vans where they had one of these machines set up, and he was filming the radiation signs that the guys had put out, warning people not to approach due to radiation. And so he began to film it, and of course these people rushed around there and tried to get him to go away, and he was questioning them, saying, why have you got these machines? Why are they in use? Why have you got these radiation signs out here? What is it that you're doing with these machines? So there was plenty of evidence of this. The last piece of that little puzzle is Senator Malcolm Roberts got up in parliamentary hearings, and he had the head of the AFP there who was questioning them, and he said to the head of the AFP, he didn't ask him, did they use machines against the crowd? He didn't say that. What he said was, what were the types of machines you used that you aimed at the crowds during the Freedom March? And the AFP, the head of the AFP, could easily have just said, we did not use anything. That is a lie. It's conspiracy theory. a theory, it is bullshit. He could have said that. Now that's true, right? He could have just said that. But he didn't, because that would have been lying. He said, I cannot tell you. I will take the question under notice. That pretty much means is I'll take my time getting back to you, by which time it'll be all blown over and, you won't get an answer. That was his response. I will take the question under notice. Now, Malcolm Roberts said to him, well, why wouldn't you know? You're the head of the AFP. You must have signed off to deploy this. And he kept just saying, I will take the question under notice. So that in itself tells you they use this machinery. The second part of that part is I was affected, as were the group that we were with. And not only were we affected, but our technology was affected. My phone, I couldn't use my phone. I took some footage and everything was going okay. I went to upload it, couldn't upload it. Now, you might say, well, that's because so many people were in the area. Well, not according to the media. There was nobody there. A couple of thousand. I think the media said 3,500. This lady said 10 to 15,000. But it made no difference. They were blocking the signals. They used machinery to block all technology in the area. My phone was rendered useless. Every 20 seconds it would turn itself off. It just kept turning itself off, and it was hot. So I ended up turning the thing completely off and throwing it in the car, and I couldn't use it. In fact, that phone I had to replace with this one about 2 days later when we got back to Sydney. I could not get the thing to work properly. It would stay on for maybe an hour and a half, and it would turn itself. It kept turning itself on and off. It was absolutely fried. But the interesting part was when we left Canberra on the Sunday and we were driving to Goulburn for breakfast, when we got to there was a point where we reached just out of Canberra where we were all travelling in convoy, and everybody's phones, because we're two-way radios, right? I got one here. Two-way radios, everybody's phones started pinging and going off. Missed calls, messages, notifications, the whole thing. So it was like there was this range of this block, and then we got out of that and everybody's phones started going nuts. Now, when we got to Goulburn, we sat down and really feeling exhausted, and I just thought, oh, well, we camped out, so maybe it's just that, whatever might have been the case. Very a physical tiredness in our bodies. And didn't drink much, so it wasn't that. And in fact, if you know me, I was in bed by about 10 o'clock. I was in bed before Hoodie arrived for them to talk, and they were talking about these weapons, because he came and joined in our group, the Navy guys, and was chatting to them. Anyway, I was sitting there with some friends, and one of the ladies said to me, what's wrong with your lips? And I'm like, I don't know. And I was going, this, and all this skin was coming off my bloody lips. Now, the lady said it was a high UV and a very hot day. Well, it was 32 degrees. That's not that hot. That's hot, but it's not that hot. The second thing is, I don't know if she could possibly say she's not a bloody, weather bureau person. It was a high UV. Sounds to me like she threw that in there to support her narrative. The thing about that was we had backpacks with water, so we were very well hydrated. We had tons of water with us we carried, and we were very well hydrated. I also had one of those big straw hats from Bunnings, right? And we sat in the shade. If you know Old Parliament House, facing it, we're on the left-hand side in amongst the gum trees, so heaps of trees. And so we all sat up in the trees. So we were in the shade for most of the day. And it was no issue for us. And I don't get burnt. And all my tongue had, like I'd been scorched, like I drunk really hot coffee. All my tongue was just seared. It was the weirdest thing. And I'm looking across at this lady, and I said, your lips are the same. And then she get a little mirror out, the women do, and she had all these white little pimply things all inside her mouth, or everywhere, these bloody white pustules. Now, the other part, that is the last part I want to mention, that Senator Malcolm Roberts set up a website and asked people to send in pictures if they had suffered any kind of harm or consequences at the rally. And he was inundated with tens of thousands of photos from people, all suffering the same damn symptoms, right? It wasn't sunburn, I can tell you that for a fact. It was a burn, but it was not sunburn. If you told me it was radiation burn, I believe you. For 2 days afterwards, when we got back to Sydney, I couldn't move. I was exhausted. My body was so sore, like I'd been in. It was just so heavy and sore and tired. I couldn't move. I laid in a lounge for 2 days. I was absolutely spent, would be a term. And I had not felt that kind of tiredness before in my life, other than maybe surfing, 6 to 10 foot bunga for 5 hours. But I had never felt anything like that. It was just absolutely drained of energy. I was so sore. Anyway, make of that what you will. The last thing I want to bring up, and there's another thing that this particular lady brought into question, was a mere fact that, hang on, apologies, lost my train of thought there, apologise. She talked about some of the speakers who were there. Now, you had guys like Graham Hood, who was 35 years, a Qantas pilot, very intelligent man, and very strong in his own religion. I think he's a Seventh-day Adventist. Very strong, beautiful speaker, lovely, lovely man. And guys like Ricardo Bossi. Bossi was the former head of, what was it? Like the Green Berets, what do you call it? A branch of the Australian Defence Force. And so he was a major officer in one of the Defence Force departments of Australia. Can't think of what it was, but I did kind of know. So we had some wonderful speakers, and they were not people who were prone to just bandying about some kind of idiocy or some kind of tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy. They weren't up there going, we need to bloody overthrow the government and, and then we'll have some beers afterwards, eh? It was nothing like that at all. So a lot of these people are very, very eloquent. I got speaking with a couple. He was a retired doctor, him and his wife, they had been in their 70s, and he made the comment to me that he was very, very glad he was no longer a practicing physician because he doesn't know what he would have done. He had colleagues who'd been given a statement by AFRA and they knew their hands were bound. They were totally gagged by AFRA's statement, Australian Professional Health Regulatory Association, and they would lose their licence and their ability to practice and be hauled before the board if indeed they spoke against the narrative. And that is an absolute fact. So those are the things that I just wanted to bring up, just so you understand what was going on. That interview was sent to me and I was like, as was the thing with Kelly Slater. Kelly Slater, 10 times world champion surfer. He's no idiot. He's travelled the world multiple times. He's embedded himself in various cultures throughout the world. He spent time in very poor, Rio de Janeiro, Puerto Rico, and whatever, all these different villages. He has more integrity as a world traveller than that journalist. So he would understand the issues are on a base level with the lower socioeconomic peoples. He didn't stay in the Marriott everywhere he went, He often camped in very remote areas where he was surfing and embedded himself in the local culture. So he's no idiot. Pat Cash, you can think of him what you will. He's travelled the world in his profession, lives in London now, but he's travelled the world in his profession and was one of Australia's greatest tennis players. So, you can make of that what you will. But every time somebody speaks against the narrative, just to label them as a cooker or a tinfoil hat wearer or a conspiracy theorist is just idiotic. I mean, I don't know how many people are going to come out until eventually there's so many that you just can't possibly write everybody off. I once said to a guy, how many doctors would have to speak? How many professors would have to speak? How many scientists would have to speak? How many virologists, immunologists, biologists would have to speak until you finally acknowledge the fact that something has gone wrong here, that they're not telling you the truth, that there's a lie being spread and propped up by the media and the governments because they're all under contracts to these major big farmers and they have to carry through. What's it going to take? Give me a number. Give me a number. Is it 1,000, 5,000, how many? Well, 17,000 doctors 2 weeks ago signed a petition calling for the end of the jab and for the prosecution of the heads of Moderna and Pfizer. So that's 17,000 medical professionals worldwide signed that treaty. So, who knows? All I'm doing is waiting for an arrest. This whole, hold the lines, trust the plan, stay the course. Okay, it's all well and good, just bloody arrest somebody. And so that's enough for me. It's a big enough video. I'm going to go back to Gary's. Peace and light, that old guy Australia. And like, share, subscribe. Be good to hit 500 subscribers on YouTube. I'm not that far off, so it's been a blessing. I really appreciate everything you do, and I love the comments. Comment down below, and we'll catch you soon.